OBA webinar series. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the fifth webinar of the OBA webinar series. My name is Raluca Golumbeanu, and I'm infrastructure specialist in GPOBA. The OBA webinars aim to facilitate peer-to-peer exchange among OBA experts, strategic partners, donors, governments, clients, and practitioners. The series will offer monthly sessions in a variety of topics such as urban transport, solid waste management, public-private partnerships, fragile and conflict-affected countries, health, program for results before I and more. If you are new to the concept of OBA, make sure to check us out on the website www.gpoba.org. You will find a variety of resources, including an e-learning course on OBA. The topic today is on solar irrigation in Bangladesh. I'm very happy to introduce the speakers. Mr. Enamul Karim Pavel currently leads Infrastructure Development Company Limited, IRCOL's renewable energy team in Bangladesh. He joined IRCOL in 2004 and has been instrumental in the development of IRCOL's renewable energy programs, including the solar home systems, solar irrigation pumps, domestic biogas, improved cookstoves, solar mini-grids, and biogas and biomass-based electricity projects. Mr. Zubair Sadek is Senior Energy Specialist in the Energy and Extractive Global Practice, and he's the task team leader of the successful RERED project, Rural Electrification Renewable Energy Development in Bangladesh, which has been providing support to increasing access to clean energy in rural areas of Bangladesh through renewable energy. Today, the topic, as I mentioned before, is solar-based irrigation systems, which are environmentally friendly solutions for agriculture. Bangladesh has embarked on a process of replacing diesel pumps with solar irrigation to reduce dependency on fossil fuel under private sector-led implementation arrangement. The webinar will focus on the financing mechanisms that support this process, including output-based aid, OBA subsidies, that make the investment affordable to farmers in rural, remote areas in Bangladesh. GPOBA has financed the development of solar irrigation technology in off-grid areas under the Rural Electrification Renewable Energy Development RERED project. Just to touch base on the logistics today, we have reserved time for Q&A after the presentation. You can type questions, comments during the presentation in the chat box located at the right of your screen, and we'll make sure to address them during the Q&A session. Thank you very much for your attention, and Zubair, you can proceed.
Thank you, Raluca. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone wherever you are located. It's our pleasure to be presenting this irrigation program in Bangladesh through this webinar forum, which is the first time for both of us, and I think it's the first time for all three of us presenting through a webinar. So please bear with us if there are issues, problems, technical difficulties, or if you are not getting everything that we are telling. We would try our best to make the next 1 hour or so as rewarding as we can possibly make it. To begin with, if I hope all of you are, you can see the first slide, solar irrigation in Bangladesh. To begin with, in the second slide, let me briefly touch upon the country context a little bit. Bangladesh is one of the smallest countries with a very high population. If you are, it's like the size of the state of Iowa in the US in terms of geographical size, but the population is half of the US. So just imagine what can happen to the US if half of its population were in a tiny state like Iowa. Given that high concentration of rural population has been a blessing actually for the many renewable energy programs that we are trying to support in Bangladesh. I will talk about that a little bit later, but just on the access to electricity, 50% having access to grid, 10% to solar home systems, altogether 60% access. The major reason for this huge uptake of the renewable energy solar home systems has been the slowdown in grid expansion because of the primary fuel constraints. Majority of the power generation, even like 4 or 5 years, until 4 or 5 years ago, it was based predominantly natural gas based power generation, which itself, natural gas itself is in short supply. So the government had to go for liquid fuel run plants, which are short term, but beginning to look like they are going to stay for a while. But these are clearly unsustainable from financial and environmental point of view. So the country definitely has to look for off-grid solutions, and solar home system came about from that perspective. Talking about the irrigation pumps, Pavel later will talk about why the country is trying to switch to solar irrigation pumps. Majority of the pumps in Bangladesh are run on diesel, and only a small amount of irrigation pumps are run by electricity. And because of the shortage of generation of electricity, going forward, the country would have very little option for electricity-based irrigation. So the major focus has been to replace this huge number of diesel run pumps. Right now, there are about 1.34 million pumps operating. Most of it is small pumps that can be replaced by the solar irrigation pumps. And there's a huge subsidy involved, annual subsidy of 280 million, which is actually based on the high oil prices, about $80–90 barrel prices. The most recent estimates are not presently available, but definitely going forward, the diesels, if the oil prices go up, the subsidy will go up again. But the government is really trying to reduce the dependence on imported diesel for irrigation. So they're actually looking for replacing the diesel pumps with solar irrigation. Going to the next slide, a little bit about the project context. We have this RERET 2 project that the predecessor RERET project is the one that started the solar home system program in Bangladesh back in 2012. And any discussion on solar irrigation cannot happen without first discussing about the solar home system program, because the implementation model for the solar irrigation is pretty much similar to what we have for solar home systems. And just very briefly, the solar home systems program is a public-private partnership where the NGOs are the ones installing the systems, and the project offers credit support and grant support to those NGOs after the systems have been installed. Very much an OBA concept where the outputs are verified, confirmed, and then project supports are extended. And we have the same implementation arrangement for the irrigation pumps as well that Pavel later would be talking about. So far, the RERET project has supported about 1.2 million solar home. Altogether, with World Bank, with other donors, altogether 3.5 million solar home systems have been installed. Every month, about 50,000 systems are being installed. And predecessor RERET project supported 1.2 million. World Bank support 1.2 million from the earlier project, and then another 700,000 from the current project that we have with the implementing agency right now. If you look at the table at the bottom of the slide, it looks like a Christmas tree project, but so many different interventions. But the beauty of this is that all of these interventions are following very similar implementation arrangement, in the sense that NGOs or private sponsors will be installing the systems or operating the systems, and they will receive project support after the systems are installed. And we have the same implementing agency, ITCOL, doing the project. We will talk about a little bit about the implementing agency. But all these interventions are following the same implementation arrangement and same implementing agency. So it has been, although many different interventions, but it's pretty much streamlined in terms of the implementation arrangement. Going to the next slide, as I said, the OBA facility RERD program is pretty much everything. Every intervention under RERD program is an OBA arrangement. We are trying to, for the solar irrigation pumps, we are trying to target the rural off-grid farmers who are not connected to the diesel pumps. And these in Bangladesh, the ownership of land is the land is so fragmented. Each farmer, the average land ownership is really small. In this, one farmer owns very small amount of land. So any intervention targeted towards rural Bangladeshi farmers means that it's so poor because the farmers are marginal farmers with very little land ownership. In terms of accountability principle, the project sponsor is accountable for the result, and the project support, either credit facility or grant support, are extended after the systems are installed and output verified. And the program has ample scope for fostering innovation. The sponsors are free to choose whatever solutions they can provide. There's an independent technical standards committee of ITCOL. It's even independent of ITCOL's interference. These are the technical people who would go through the proposals submitted by the sponsors, the tech specs of the different interventions, and they will approve those technical standards. And there's ample scope for the sponsors to suggest any innovation to reduce the costs of the interventions. In terms of incentives, the capital buy-down grants are given. The subsidies are capital buy-down grants to make the irrigation affordable to poorer farmers. And the output verification, this is slightly different from a typical GPOBA finance project, where the verification is done by ITCOL, the implementing agency, not by a third-party auditor. And we got around that because we could establish that ITCOL is not the one who is installing the systems. So this is that NGOs or the partner organizations are the ones who are installing the systems. So ITCOL would definitely be is the one who is verifying the output of the partner organizations. Now let me stop a little bit. I'm not sure whether my speech has been loud enough or not, but the host soon let me know if I'm still a little bit I'll try to speak up. Okay, it's fine. Thank you. So the verification is done by ITCOL, and the installers, because ITCOL is not the one who is installing the system, so it's fine from that perspective. And in terms of sustainability, the project subsidies are geared towards targeted towards the capital buy-down grants, and the operating costs and the remaining costs are covered from the beneficiaries. So this is definitely, all the interventions are definitely sustainable after the capital buy-down grants are provided. And that's one time, as it is the capital buy-down grant, it's one time upfront, transparent. After that, all the costs are covered from the beneficiaries. A little bit about the implementing agency, ITCOL. The reason why the program has been so successful, starting with the solar home system, and we have just started the solar irrigation. I'm sure the irrigation program would be as successful, if not even bigger success than the solar home system, is because this implementing agency, ITCOL, it's a government owned, it's slightly different than many of a typical World Bank intervention. It's a financial intermediary owned by the government, but run by professional management hired from the market. There is a board represented by the government and private sector, but they are only looking, and they have strong oversight on the policy matters. They don't interfere in day-to-day management. Everyday management is managed by these professionals hired from the market, one of which is Mr. Pavel, who will be speaking later just after me. And ITCOL's initial mandate was providing long-term financing to large infrastructure projects, and later we got our partnership from the World Bank side with ITCOL to get into this renewable energy financing. And all the interventions, they are partnering with the non-government organizations, NGOs for the solar home systems, private sponsors for the solar irrigation pumps, and for mini grids and other interventions. And ITCOL's role is to do proper due diligence of project design and close supervision of implementation. And as I said, this part of the program probably can be replicated in other parts of the world. If you have a really good implementing agency with the right people, with the right incentives, you can definitely do wonders, as many of you would agree, already know. It's the people who make the things different, and ITCOL is the one for which most of the credit for the success of the solar home program goes to ITCOL's efficient management, oversight, correct structure, things like that. So with that, I would stop here and would request Pavel to talk about the why diesel pumps and the program implementation arrangement and the financing mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Zubair. Hi, everyone. I once again welcome you all to today's webinar. This is like my previous presentation. This is also for me for the first time. I'm from ITCOL, working at ITCOL for a long time, and closely involved with the renewable energy activities of ITCOL. I'll basically explain our solar irrigation programs. First, I'll start with why we are actually replacing diesels with solar irrigation pumps. In Bangladesh, more than 1.4 million diesel and irrigation pumps are in operation, and these have frequent technical problems. Our farmers are operating those, and they have to maintain those, so it's a huge hassle for them. So and also the cost of diesel is increasing. Government is providing subsidy to reduce the cost. Also, it's also a burden for the government. And also transportation from of diesel from shops to the field is very challenging for them. There are supply disruptions, and also sometimes they pay much higher price than what the price actually is in the local market. And of course, diesel lamp pumps have environmental impact and environmental pollution. So that's why we have planned to replace diesel lamp pumps with solar irrigation pumps. We are currently practicing two business models. First one is fee-for-service model. Basically, so far we have implemented solar irrigation pumps under this model. Here in fee-for-service model, there are project sponsors who actually own and operate the pump, and they supply water to farmers, and farmers pay them water tariff in quarterly basis. So far we have installed roughly 130 irrigation pumps. Out of that, 124 have been financed from under RAD2, and also we are recently considering ownership model where we will consider smaller capacity pumps. Individual farmers will be the owners of the pumps. They will get this on credit, and they will pay installments to the organizations who will actually supply and install the pumps. So these are the two business models we are currently following. I will explain a bit on these two models. First, fee-for-service model, what we are actually practicing. We are getting funds of OBA fund, grant fund from GPOBA and other development partners, and we are getting credit from IDA and JICA. So we are actually using this grant and credit. We are giving grant and credit support to project sponsors to install the pumps. The farmers install the project sponsors install the pump. They supply water to the farmers, and farmer pays water tariff. Farmer pays water tariff on quarterly basis, and the project sponsors repaying the loan we have extended to them, and also we are repaying the loan to the development partners through the government. So this is the structure. First, the project sponsor will have to install the pump. They will have to supply water to the farmers, and then only we are giving them grant and credit support after checking the performance of the pumps. So this is the basic structure of fee-for-service model. Ownership model is a bit different from it. Here, project sponsors, they will not own the pump. They will sell pump to the farmers on credit, and farmers will own the pump. They will operate the pump, and they will pay monthly installment to the project sponsor. So here, project sponsor is selling the pumps on credit, not they are selling water to the farmers. So this is the basic difference between fee-for-service model and ownership model. This is the technical aspects of solar irrigation pumps. For fee-for-service model, we are considering larger capacity pumps. For ownership model, smaller ones. This is because if project sponsors install smaller capacity pumps, then they will have higher operational cost. They will cover smaller number of farmers, and so that project will not be financially viable for project sponsors. That's why for fee-for-service model, our project sponsors are preferring larger capacity pumps, so that they can cover more number of farmers, and in that case their operational cost is low, and it's financially viable for them. For ownership model, we are considering smaller capacity pumps. So here farmers will own the pumps. They will use the pump for themselves, and also they can sell some water to the other farmers. But here they will own the pump. So in case of larger pumps, we PV capacity is roughly 11 kilowatt peak. Pump capacity is 7 kilowatt peak. For it is roughly 900,000 liters per day. Total dynamic head is now 10 to 14 meters. We actually considering pumps it's less dynamic head, because if we go with higher heads, then project cost increases substantially, and which is not actually profitable for the project sponsors. Project cost for larger capacity pumps is roughly 36,000. It's covering roughly 17 acres for paddy and 28 acres for other crops. It's an ownership model. We can use smaller capacity pumps. Is 4 kilowatt peak. Pump capacity will be roughly 2.5 kilowatt. It can supply 250,000 liters per day with similar head, and project cost is roughly 9,000 US dollars. It's covering 5 acres of land for paddy and 8 acres for other crops. Irrigation charges are roughly same, roughly 115 US dollars per acre. In case of for paddy per season, basically a main crop here is paddy, and it requires huge amount of water supply. So in that case, irrigation charges will be $115 per acre. Here we can see, in case of ownership model, there are two parties: project sponsors and implementing agency. It's called project sponsor. Basically, they are selecting the areas, they are selecting the customers, farmers, and they are forming a cooperative with the farmers. Then they are installing irrigation pumps as per the technical specifications approved by our technical standards committee. They are also operating the pumps and supplying water to the farmers on crop basis at a certain rate. The rate is agreed between project sponsor and the farmers before installation of the pumps. and the project sponsors are collecting payments from the farmers for supply of water. As an implementing agency, its call is providing technical support. We have independent technical committee for setting technical specifications and enlisting manufacturers or suppliers of the pumps. We are providing financial support to the sponsors after proper due diligence of the project costs and credit worthiness of the sponsors. We are also inspecting and monitoring pump performance, and once we are satisfied with the performance of the pumps, then only we are disbursing grant and credit support to the project sponsor. Area selection is very important for solar irrigation pumps. We actually try to identify areas. I mean, we encourage the project sponsors to identify areas where 3-4 crops are normally grown, so that irrigation pumps can be used throughout the year. Farmers are currently using diesel pumps in the off-grid areas. Most of them are, the farmers are very small. They have small amount of land. They are marginal farmers. So once we install one large capacity pumps, then we can see that 20 to 30 farmers are getting benefit from one single pump. Also sites, so we have to select a site which doesn't go under water during rainy season, so that farmers are using pumps in those, using water from the pumps for rainy seasons also. The groundwater level is also very important. I also already mentioned we are not considering projects in the areas where water level is very high. In that case, project cost increases substantially, which is not financially viable. Also, we are checking arsenic before approving one particular site, and also that there should have sufficient land for installation of solar panels. Next, financing mechanism. If pump cost is 36,000 US dollars, we are considering 40 to 50% grant support. If we give 40% grant support, it's coming to 40,400. So remaining cost is 21,600, and loan is 40% of the project cost. So it's again 14,400, and project sponsor is injecting 20% of the project cost as equity. 15 to 20% of the project cost is equity. So it's coming to 7,200. The loan amount is repaid by project sponsor in 8 years. Interest rate is 6% on reducing balance method, and so farmers, project sponsors are repaying the loan in 29 quarterly installments. Cost component. If you look at the cost component, you can see the solar panel accounts for 25% of the project cost. Pump 11%, pump controller is with costly item is 14% of the project cost. Mounting structure is 12%, and buried pipe boring has some cost 11%, but buried pipe 13%. So these are the breakdown of project cost components. So that's all from my side. I'm ready to answer the questions you have already asked.
Thank you, Pavel.
Thank you.
There has been a lot of questions so far, and let me try to quickly answer a few of them, and then I will refer some of them to Pavel to answer very quickly. Raha asked a question: 2.3 million not supported by 2.3 million solar home system not supported by World Bank. Did they receive the same level of donor support? Yes. Basically, when World Bank started with it called started supporting ITCO's program of solar home system back in 2002, 2003, it was the only donor supporting the program, and since then other donors have come forward to this program following the same implementation arrangement, same financing mechanism. So between RERAD and RERAD 2 projects, World Bank supported about 2.1 million, and the rest 1.4 million systems are being supported by ADB, the Islamic Development Bank, JICA, and other donors for KfW for grants, for grant money, JICA, KfW, GIZ and other donors have pitched in, and obviously GPOBA is also providing matching grant support to the solar home systems and other interventions. Let me just clarify quickly why we talked about solar home system. There seems to be a little bit confusion. Pierrick asked a question, if the prior use of millions of solar pumps, was that the key reason for the success of the program? Let me clarify, the solar home system that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, those are solar home systems for lighting needs. The implementation arrangement has been the same for the solar irrigation pumps, and what we are targeting for the irrigation pumps is the diesel, replacing the diesel pumps. There is no prior use of solar pumps, but obviously there is a huge number of diesel pumps that are out there. The government's program is to replace those diesel pumps. But the critical success factor for Bangladesh for solar home system, which I hope would be replicated also in the irrigation program, is that huge concentration of rural people with some level of income, and this presence of large number of NGOs at the very rural level, and that really allows to bring the services to the remote rural areas at an affordable cost because of this large number of NGOs who are keen to actively participate in these businesses. Now let me go back to Francois' questions. How long has this project been under implementation? We had project since 2003, and we have ongoing engagement with ITCOL from 2003 on the solar home system for lighting. And then the irrigation pump started about two years ago, and it's just beginning to scale up. So far about 120 pumps installed, and a few hundreds are in the pipeline. So we are looking at rapid scale up going forward. There has been question about ITCOL's from Manaf and Zaidun about the ITCOL structure, how ITCOL can pay ITCOL's market-based compensation being a government agency. It has been set up as a company under the Companies Act, so it can have its own pay scale, and ITCOL's board decides on the pay scale, and it's not the bureaucracy, it's not public money that is being budgeted for ITCOL salaries. They earn their own money. Initially, initially a World Bank supported project established ITCOL as a company, and then since then ITCOL is earning its own money, offering market-based compensation. And I will request, I will basically refer the difficult questions to Pavel now, and if you can, okay, let me answer then Amal's question. What was the impact on the groundwater level? Are we sure we are not creating a situation of overuse of groundwater? There has been elaborate system in place. What this project is trying to do is replacing diesel pumps. So the farmers are already have been irrigating their lands with diesel pumps. Now it's replacing those diesel pumps with solar irrigation pumps. So we are not talking about any additional withdrawal of water. Bangladesh being a delta with heavy monsoon every year, in rural area the water recharge is happening very quickly, and we don't have that much of a risk of groundwater depletion, as at least now we haven't got that risk as a major one. But still, each pump would have a flow meter that would basically measure the amount of water. Our initial fear was that if the water is free after the pumps are installed, there's no operating cost like a diesel pump would have, then farmers would be inclined to waste water. But then there has been some comfort in the sense that if the fields are over irrigated, if the fields are over flooded with water more than necessary, then it hurts the crop production. So farmers would not want to just flood their water just because water is free. They would definitely want to irrigate whatever is needed, not more than that, because it hurts crop production. Now, Pavel, do you want to address this question from Wolfgang? Is the life cycle cost of diesel subsidy savings larger than the capital buy-down grant support solar pumps? So basically, determining the amount of subsidy, how we came about this. Basically, Wolfgang, to respond to that, the initial subsidy of up to 40% of the project cost, that was the level that we thought that would be necessary to match the water rate from solar irrigation to that of the diesel pumps. And because diesel is subsidized in Bangladesh at $1,800 a barrel, definitely there was a huge subsidy from the government side that was going into these diesel operated pumps, and that subsidy was an operating subsidy. We were trying to match that operating subsidy with capital buy down subsidy from the solar irrigation pump. Anil asked a very critical question, which is very relevant, and at $50 a barrel price, whether solar irrigation is still economically and financially viable. Anil, just give us some more time to do this calculation. We'll come back to you. But as of now, I think the break-even price back then was something around $45 or $50. But we will definitely do the recalculation and come back to you offline after this session. Christopher, do you know the years to break even between solar and diesel? How much time does it take for breaking even between solar and diesel? Okay, that is something we will take offline. Sorry, Christopher, we'll come back to this very soon with you. Now, Pierrick asked a question. Project sponsor differs from the local irrigation agency managing the scheme, if there is one. How do they interact with the issue? So far there's none. The local irrigation agency, they are looking at the big irrigation schemes, and most of the diesel, all the diesel operated pumps that are out there in the field, these are privately owned, individual owned. They move around the fields and basically sell water to the farmers, and also farmers do own their own pumps. So there's no public agency that is catering to this small diesel pump market. It's purely private market, and we are trying to bring in a different set of service providers who would be replacing the diesel pumps. Many of these, as once the ownership model becomes more feasible, then the farmers themselves would be owning pumps rather than buying water from the irrigation service provider. Now this one, Pavel, you definitely need to take. What is the cost? Pashupati asked this question: why is the cost of 11 kilowatt system so high? It is 4 times the cost of 4 kilowatt system.
Thank you. If you look at the project cost components, solar panel price, solar panel price costs only 25% of the pump cost. Pump cost is 36,000, solar panel costs 9,000 roughly. So most of the costs are coming from other components. If you see the module mounting structure, 12%, civil construction, boring, piping system, transportation, all are adding another 50% of the project cost. So that's how project cost is increasing, but still we think it's a very competitive price. Initially the price of solar irrigation pumps were very high. That time, for the pump we initially installed with similar head, the first few projects we installed had a capacity of roughly less than 400,000 liters per day with similar price. Now we can see that project cost price has come down significantly. So now it's with the same project cost we can supply 900,000 liters per day. And what is the
Yes, thank you. Now, Anil asked another question. Since water is not required due to irrigation schedule, how many days per year are the small and large pumps used productively?
Yes, irrigation pumps are only right. Irrigation pumps are not used throughout the year. Though we are selecting irrigation pumps for those areas where farmers are cultivating 3 or 4 crops, still we can see that for 50% of the times of a year, irrigation pumps does not operate. So in many of our projects, our project sponsors are running husking machines, grinding machines, etc. With the electricity which is not used for irrigation, because they can effectively use electricity generated from solar panels for running husking and grinding machines or crusher machines, which will actually generate additional revenue for them.
Okay. Okay, next question from Wolfgang, project sponsor assistance to formation of cooperatives. Hello? Okay, project sponsor assistance to formation of cooperatives must be for water using cooperatives only, I suppose. Yes, the cooperatives would be would be formed only for water use. So these are cooperatives formed, informal cooperatives, but they would have cooperative agreements with the sponsor, and they would be only for water use. Oliver and Amal asked a similar question about Pakistan. If there's no, yes, there's not that much of a concern of overuse of water in Bangladesh because of the delta, but definitely similar situation cannot be guaranteed for Pakistan. And at one point we were I heard from a colleague from Pakistan that it's so different than Bangladesh is, so not every country would be the same. So I would assume that for solar irrigation to Pakistan to work, given the depth of water, the head of the pumps, it may not be economically feasible to try this in Pakistan. But for a delta like Bangladesh and also eastern India, it does make sense because of the relatively shallow depth of the water table, and given the monsoon occurring, recharging the water table, so it does make sense for a delta like Bangladesh. Zaidun asked a question about the economic rate of return for the project. We should have gotten this number ingrained in our head, and then I was desperately trying to search the project paper for that number. It's skipping our mind for the moment. We'll come back to you, Zaidun, with the economic rate of return calculation that we did, number that we have from the project. Wolfgang, the key to the success of the solar home program is the combination of installers and credit. Exactly, pretty much you have the right service providers, huge network of microfinance NGOs in the rural areas who are into this business of selling solar home systems, and the project offering credit and capital buy down grants, making it affordable, making the systems affordable to the rural consumers. So you have on the one side very good service providers, large number of service providers competing for the good economies, competing for the good price, and the project is offering credit support and grant support to make the system affordable to rural consumers. Demetrius asked a question about how is maintenance and repairs carried out if pumps break down or controllers don't operate as they should be. How is the maintenance and repairs carried out? I would refer it to Pavel for answering.
Basically, solar irrigation pumps requires very low maintenance. I mean, the project sponsors are the suppliers are providing long-term warranty for the pumps and controller. Initially, there were only few number of pumps and few number of suppliers, so it was a bit difficult for the project sponsors to get immediate response from the suppliers. But still, our project pump suppliers have immediately responded. In few cases, we actually experienced during our implementation period. So our project pump suppliers are supporting the project sponsors when they face difficulty. But I can say that there are very few problems with the pumps so far we have experienced.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Come back and thank you so much. And thank you, Raluca, for that info. The financial return is 10 to 30% after accounting for the 40% capital buy-down grant, and the economic rate of return is definitely much higher than that.
Yes.
And so then let me go to the next question. Paul Martin asked, I understand the sponsors receive both credit and grant after installation. Was initial capital problem for these sponsors? The sponsors would still have to put in 15 to 20% of the project cost as equity. The capital buy-down grant is given to make the water cost affordable to the rural farmers. Pretty much what they're paying for the diesel pumps, the capital buy-down grant is given to match that cost of farming irrigation from diesel run pumps. And the credit support also is making the cost, basically the sponsors will be able to put more than 15 to 20% equity. So the rest is a combination of credit and grant to make sure that the costs to the farmers are comparable to diesel run pumps. Then the question about Wolf, okay, two questions from Wolfgang. One about mini grids. Why are there so few in such a densely populated country? Difficult question, referring to Pavel to answer. Okay.
So far we have actually installed 4 mini grid projects. Under our solar home system program, we actually providing access to electricity to rural people. They are now getting only electricity for lighting purposes and for running TV and using the mobile phones. These are the support they are getting. So later we decided that we should provide better support to the farmer, to the people living in the off-grid areas. So we decided to go with the solar mini grids. So a few years back we first installed our solar mini grid project. It was 100 kilowatt project, and based on the success of that particular project, other project sponsors came forward to install solar irrigation pumps. That time, I mean, the first project was installed in 2010. That time the project cost was much higher, so we couldn't see much financial return, even though we provided 50% subsidy to that project. Project sponsor put 20% equity, and we extended 30% credit. 50% came from grant support. Still, the financial return for the sponsors was not that attractive, but with the reduction of price of panels, and also the inverters, the project cost came down to 80%. I mean, project cost reduced by 20%, roughly 20 to 20%, 25%. So now we can project sponsors can see financial returns. So very recently, I mean, in this year, I mean, in January, we another 2 projects came into operation. In March, another 1 project came into operation, and we have a number of projects in the pipeline. So we are expecting that within 2 years, there will be additional 50 to 20 solar mini grid projects in operation in Bangladesh.
Thank you. Yes, and also to reiterate, sorry for the echo, folks. We are trying to learn the technology here. Now, also what Pavel just said about the mini grids, it was a new intervention modeled after the solar home system. There were sponsors to be developed. There's still a high risk of grid arrival because Bangladesh geographically is so small, and if the country could address the primary fuel, then majority of the country could be covered on the national grid, and the grid extension has been slightly unplanned. So one day an off-grid side a sponsor would select for a mini grid, and months from now there's no guarantee that the grid won't be arriving in that area. So we have been struggling with that grid arrival risk for some time, just trying to figure out remote enough area to be safe from grid expansion, but it's so difficult, and that also took some time for the mini grids. Now we have an arrangement with the government. To some extent, we have some demarcation of grid and off-grid areas, so going forward that challenge would be mitigated to some extent. Let me repeat the question. Zaidun did not get the return FIRR economic return question because of the echo. The FIRR is 10 to 13% after accounting for 40% capital buy down grant, and it's actually 15 to 16 depending on the calculation, about 15 to 16. That's what Pavel is correcting me, 15 to 16% FIRR, and the economic return is definitely much higher than that. But as I said, Anil's Anil, $50 barrel, we haven't done the calculation, but I think the break-even price for oil was about $45, something like that. Coming back to query questions, subsidies to individual farmers or groups? Yes, it's actually the project sponsor receives the subsidies after the pumps are installed, so that the cost that he's going to charge to the farmers are going to be lower than what the full cost of the irrigation pump and the system would have been. So the subsidies are going to the sponsors, and ultimately the farmers are the ones who are benefiting from that subsidy. IRRICAL keeps track of the charges that the sponsors are making to the farmers, so they know that the capital buy down grants provided to the system are passed on to the consumers, to the real beneficiaries. Wolfgang's question, how much of the cost of a solar home system and a Pico PV system is credit financed by IRRICAL's project sponsors? For a typical solar home system, credit financed by IRRICAL's. Okay, let me refer that to Pavel. How much of the cost of a solar home or a Pico PV is credit financed by IRRICAL's project sponsors?
Okay. Project sponsors are actually selling solar home systems mostly on credit. I can say more than 90%, 98% of our solar home systems are sold on credit to the customers, and farmers are paying 10 to 15% as down payment, and the remaining amount, 85 to 90% of the system cost is credit facility from project sponsor to the customers, and we are refinancing 70 to 80% of that loan amount which has been received by the customer. So project sponsor is also putting 15 to 20% of the system cost from their own cash flow. So that's how actually project sponsor, IRRICAL, and also the customers are participating in financing a solar home system, though roughly 65 to 70% of the system cost is coming from IRRICAL's credit support.
And also for the solar home system, we, as Pavel explained, basically once the systems are installed, they will get up to 80% of this. There would be a down payment from the household side, 10 to 15% of the rest amount. Up to 80% of the rest amount would be provided as refinancing credit facility from the project. So in summary, about 72% of the project cost, of the system cost, solar home system cost, will be credit support from the project that will be repaid for a longer term than what the households are repaying back. I think we got ourselves a little bit switching between solar home and irrigation, and that's why some of the sorry for the confusion, but we are trying to focus our discussion on irrigation, but because of the implementation modalities are so similar, we cannot stop talking about solar home systems. Coming back to the questions, inquires, is there any partnership with the equipment suppliers to bring costs down and optimize technology to specific farmers' needs? Let me respond. Very recently, we have started to, with Richard Callbacks from IFC side, we are trying to collaborate with his team, and we are trying to reach out to the suppliers of smaller size pumps to introduce them to the Bangladesh market. So we see a little bit softening of the smaller size pump segment. So yes, we are trying to have some kind of partner. We are trying to bring ITCOL partnership to the equipment suppliers to ITCOL, particularly for the smaller size pumps, because these are relatively new introduction to the Bangladesh market in terms of solar pumps. So far, these are the first installations that have been done. These are on the higher side, larger size, 7 to 11 kilowatt peak sizes. So we are trying to see some partnership going with the equipment suppliers of the smaller size pumps. Pavel would like to add something here.
When we started started financing irrigation pumps, there were only two suppliers for the pump. But gradually we encouraged more and more number of suppliers to come forward with their pumping systems, and we can say that we have created a competition among the suppliers. So that's how cost has come down significantly. Initially we installed a pump of 350,000 liters per day with roughly $36,000. Now the same pump can be supplied by the project's suppliers, same price, and they can supply the pump with the capacity of almost 2.5 to 3 times. So we can see that the project cost, if you consider that way, the project pump cost has come down to less than 50% of the initial cost. So that's how we are actually trying to involve more and more number of suppliers.
Okay, yes, thank you. I hope the echo is gone now. I have been asked to speak slower since there's echo when I speak. I'll try to speak slow. Now, Paul asked a question: if sponsors have to complete the installation before receiving ECOL grant and credit, the sponsor needs a good amount of working capital up front. For solar home system, that's true. For irrigation, there has to be a pre-financing by the solar home systems NGOs, but for solar irrigation, this would still have to put up 15 to 20% of equity upfront, and then the rest would be provided through grant and credit support.
Just to add, initially the project sponsors are paying 20% of the project cost as down payment to the supplier. Suppliers actually basically taking the they are actually getting 20% of the pump cost, and they are installing the pump at the project site, and on verification we are paying the project sponsor, and project sponsor is then paying to the money to the supplier. So the projects there are project pump suppliers who are actually arranging the fund for supply for installing the system, and then they're getting paid back by the project sponsors. That's how actually suppliers are supporting our program.
Yes, Paul, it's suppliers.
Yeah, suppliers get it. Yeah.
Now on the Paul's another question: are the fees agreed between the farmers and sponsors actually set by ITCOL, or is there competition between sponsors? How do you set the tariff that is going to be charged to the farmers?
Okay. Uh, Actually, the project sponsors sit with the farmers before installing a pump, and they discuss about the current cost of irrigation with diesel and pumps. Then they try to set something a bit lower than what they are now paying with diesel and pumps. That's how actually project sponsors negotiate with the farmers to set the price. We actually try to identify through our field survey what is the current cost of uh, irrigation with diesel lamp pumps in different areas of the country where we are going to install solar irrigation pumps.
Okay, yes. The next question, Franquez, are there any security issues, theft? So far, no. Some of the initial pumps actually had a guard 24 hours who would spend the night, who would stay at the field. And many of the, basically, these are not very far from the local communities. And in the rural area, anyone bringing out the panels or the pumps, they're a good chance to be getting caught. So far we haven't got that much of an issue in terms of stealing of equipment or something like that. Even for the individual solar home systems, so many panels on the roof, we don't have that much of a risk from theft. That hasn't come as a major risk so far. Wolfgang, what is the typical rate of interest charged by project sponsors who sell pumps to farmers who own basically what interest rate is between farmers and the sponsors? It's the market interest rate of 15 to 16% for the period of the irrigation pumps would have a repayment period of about 5 years. 15 to 16% market interest rate is what they are charged. And it's 8 p.m. Dhaka, I think 9 a.m. or yes, at 10 a.m. DC. We have just finished our 1 hour allocated for that. Okay, another Paul just asked another question. Does ITCOL approve the proposed fee to be paid by the farmers before the sponsor install the pump? You are the fees are approved. Basically, ITCOL does the due diligence as to how much the farmers are going to be charged, and based that is being checked, and once that is something within the affordability of the farmers, then the project financing would be released. We can still take a few more questions. Winston just asked another question: how effective are solar pumps in high elevation mountainous countries like Bhutan and Nepal? How much lift can these pumps generate? Difficult question. Like Pakistan, but I don't think we are talking about very deep head pumps. As I do, the difficult questions are referred to Pavel. So please, Pavel, can
Thank you. We installed our first pump in 2009 with a dynamic head of roughly 35 meters. So that time the project cost was very high, and that was our first pilot project. So we have from that experience we have seen that we should not go with the for the pumps with such a high head, because it is increasing substantially increasing the project cost, which is not actually financially viable for project sponsors. So after that, from that experience, we have decided that we should not go beyond 20-meter dynamic head, and we from our survey survey, we have seen that in most of the countries, most of the areas of Bangladesh, we can get water within 20-meter head. So irrigation project cost increases significantly with the increase of dynamic head. So it's not actually very feasible for countries like Bhutan and Nepal, where head will be roughly 100 meters or more than that.
Yes, thank you. If there are any questions, you still have the opportunity to do so. Otherwise, I think it has been a wonderful experience for us doing the first presentation through webinar. Sorry for the echo and other technological issues. We have been trying our best. I hope you learned some, maybe you got something out of this presentation. I hope your time spent here was worthy of it. And let me hand it over to Raluca now.
Thank you so much, Zubair and Pavel, and thank you so much. Thank you all for participating to this very active and very dynamic discussion. The recording and presentation will be available on our website. And lastly, the Q&A discussion will now be continued on the Community of Practice site. It's a new site that we've recently launched, which will give you an opportunity to collaborate with the webinar presenters and participants, as well as network with other results-based financing RBF practitioners within the community. You may have joined this site before the webinar started, but if you would like to continue the discussions, or if your questions have not been answered yet, please click on the Community of Practice link